Decades after the Third Crusade, which ended in the late 12th century, the focus of many crusading congregations shifted from the Holy Land to the northern fringes of Europe. This shift marked the beginning of the Northern Crusades, a series of military campaigns aimed at expanding Catholic influence into the pagan territories of the Baltic region. The crusading efforts in the Baltic region were marked by aggressive campaigns conducted by various military orders. The Sword Brethren, authorized by the Pope, were tasked with converting and conquering the local pagan tribes. The brutality of these campaigns included massacres and sieges, as the Crusaders aimed to dismantle indigenous resistance through both military force and the imposition of Christian institutions. The choice of the Baltic region for these crusades was driven by its strategic value. Positioned along key trade routes connecting Western Europe with the Byzantine Empire and Russia, the Baltic region offered significant economic opportunities. Additionally, controlling this area was seen as a means to counter the Orthodox Christian influence from the east, as the Baltic was a crucial battleground between Catholic and Orthodox powers. The Baltic region experienced intense militarization, with fortified towns emerging as key trade hubs. Crusading campaigns were marked by brutal sieges and massacres, often leading to the complete destruction of towns. Nevertheless, the religious and cultural differences between the conquerors and the indigenous people played a significant role in the conflict. The local pagan tribes had deeply rooted traditional beliefs and practices that were resistant to conversion. The imposition of Catholicism was viewed as an existential threat to their cultural identity, leading to fierce resistance against the Crusaders' attempts to convert and subdue them. The Livonian Order was born out of the merger of the Sword Brethren into the Teutonic Knights in 1237, following the devastating defeat at the Battle of Saul in 1236. This battle had nearly annihilated the Brotherhood of the Sword, leading to its absorption into the Teutonic Knights. The newly formed Livonian Order became the northern branch of the Teutonic Knights, and the largest crusading order in the region. They inherited the mission of the Northern Crusades in Livonia, continuing efforts to consolidate Catholic dominance and expand territorial control in the Baltic. They received papal authorization to launch a crusade, and in 1240, new campaigns began in the easternmost part of the Baltic region. This desire clashed with the Novgorod Republic, a powerful Russian principality. Novgorod, located in northern Russia, was one of the most powerful and economically prosperous cities in medieval Russia. Although its agricultural prospects were limited due to the harsh environment, Novgorod thrived as a major trade hub. The city was positioned on important trade routes connecting the Baltic Sea to the interior of Russia and Central Asia. Novgorod's merchants traded furs, fish, and other goods with the rest of Europe and beyond. For the Crusaders, Novgorod represented a significant prize. Beyond the religious motivations, Novgorod's strategic importance was undeniable. As a major hub in the trade networks connecting northern Europe with Byzantium and the Islamic world, control of Novgorod would have granted the Crusaders access to lucrative trade routes, boosting their economic power in the region. Additionally, Novgorod's well-fortified position made it a valuable military asset. Holding the city would have provided the Crusaders with a crucial base of operations for further campaigns into Eastern Europe, as well as a defensive buffer against the Mongol threat. The city was also a cultural and religious heartland of the Eastern Slavs. Bringing such a significant and proud rival to heel would have demonstrated the superiority of Catholicism and Western European civilization over Eastern Orthodoxy and the Slavic world. The subjugation of Novgorod would have reinforced the Crusaders' sense of divine mission and martial prowess, marking a decisive triumph in their broader campaign to dominate the Baltic region and beyond. Recognizing the danger, the Novgorod Republic began to take decisive actions to prepare for the inevitable conflict. One of the steps was to manage its geopolitical situation by maintaining diplomatic relations with the Mongol Empire, which had begun its incursions into Russian territories. The Novgorodians demonstrated their diplomatic acumen by carefully navigating between two powerful external forces, the Mongols and the Crusaders. In 1240, as Mongol forces drew near, Alexander Nevsky and the Veche chose to avoid direct military confrontation with them. Instead, Novgorod agreed to submit to Mongol overlordship and pay tribute, in the form of monetary payments and acknowledgement of Mongol sovereignty over Russian lands. Despite this submission, Novgorod retained a considerable degree of autonomy in its internal affairs, preserving its governance structure and economic stability. This strategic decision not only secured the city's survival, but also leveraged the Mongol presence to Novgorod's advantage. By acknowledging Mongol authority, Novgorod essentially used the Mongols as a buffer against Western aggression, particularly from the Crusaders. The Mongols' dominance in the region diverted some of the Crusaders' focus, allowing Novgorod to buy time and space to address its challenges from the west. This proves that Novgorod's leaders valued the preservation of their Orthodox Christian faith, cultural identity, and political autonomy above all else. By choosing Mongol control over Crusader rule, they demonstrated a pragmatic approach to survival, prioritizing the protection of their religious traditions and governance structure. It also reveals that they were willing to compromise on political submission to the Mongols, who did not interfere with their religious practices, rather than risking forced conversion and cultural domination by the Crusaders. In 1241, this strategic foresight paid off when the Livonian Order suffered a significant blow. As part of their westward expansion at the Battle of Liegnitz, the Mongols decisively defeated a combined Christian army, which included knights from the Livonian Order. This loss severely weakened the Order's military strength, diminishing their capacity to pursue aggressive campaigns in the region and easing pressure on Novgorod. In a strategic and audacious maneuver, the Crusaders successfully captured the town of Pskov, a vital ally of Novgorod. This bold action was more than just a military conquest. It was a calculated move designed to shift the balance of power in the region. Pskov was no mere settlement. It was a significant trade and military hub, crucial for maintaining the economic and defensive strength of Novgorod. Its location at the crossroads of major trade routes made it an essential center for commerce, while its military significance lay in its fortifications and strategic position. By establishing a presence in Pskov, the Livonian Order sought to tighten their grip on the region and put immense pressure on Novgorod. The capture of this key town was intended to destabilize Novgorod's defenses, disrupt its trade networks, and weaken its strategic position. Amidst these escalating threats, Alexander Nevsky emerged as Novgorod's crucial defender. Ascending as Novgorod's knyaz, the prince, in 1236, he had already demonstrated exceptional leadership by repelling the Swedish invasion at the Battle of the Neva in 1240. His previous victories showcased his strategic acumen and commitment to safeguarding his people, making him the key figure in defending Novgorod against the Livonian Order's impending assault. Understanding the strategic importance of Pskov, Alexander Nevsky resolved to reclaim the town. Despite internal divisions within Novgorod's Vech, with some members favoring negotiation, Alexander believed that military action was necessary. In early 1242, he mobilized his forces, comprising professional soldiers, local militia, and regional allies, and marched towards Pskov. He acted so quickly that the nearby garrison at Izborsk could not intervene in time. While Alexander had previously limited his actions to Novgorod territory, this time he bypassed the Izborsk stronghold and ravaged the land south of Dorpat, as an act of vengeance. As Novgorodian troops were pillaging, the Livonian Order, under Bishop Herman of Dorpat, hastily assembled an army to repel the attack. They ambushed one of Alexander's unsuspecting units, southeast of the city. The survivors regrouped with Alexander, who realized the Livonian Order had amassed enough forces to threaten his objectives. Informed by his scouts that the enemy was in pursuit, Alexander Nevsky moved north along the frozen expanse of Lake Peipus, carefully searching for a favorable defensive position. Recognizing the unique opportunities and risks posed by the frozen lake, Alexander decided to position his army at the narrow crossing between Lakes Pskov and Peipus. Here, the treacherous ice and shallow narrows would hinder the maneuverability of the heavily armored Livonian cavalry, while dense forests, swamps, and rivers surrounding the area served as natural barriers, making it difficult for the Crusaders to navigate. April in the region typically brought unstable weather conditions, and the ice on Lake Peipus was jagged and uneven, further complicating the Crusaders' movements. Novgorod's forces, composed of lightly armored infantry, archers, and mobile cavalry, were well suited for this environment. Alexander's strategy was to lure the Livonian forces onto the weaker ice, where their heavy armor and horses would become a disadvantage. The ice, prone to cracking under their weight, could buckle, slowing their advances. Additionally, the lake's flat shoreline, shallow waters, and low-lying terrain were flood-prone, creating a treacherous battlefield that would favor Alexander's more agile troops. As the Livonian Knights approached Lake Peipus, the landscape began to open up, revealing the vast frozen expanse ahead. To the Livonian leaders, this appeared to be ideal terrain for deploying their heavy cavalry, which was central to their military tactics. The open ice seemed to provide the space needed for large-scale cavalry maneuvers, and they viewed the lake as a perfect location for a decisive confrontation with Alexander's forces. Confident in their ability to dominate the battlefield with their armored knights, they pressed forward, unaware that the very terrain they believed would secure their victory would ultimately become their downfall. Upon reaching the narrow crossing between Lakes Pskov and Peipus, Alexander Nevsky strategically positioned his troops on the eastern shore. This critical location allowed him to control access and prepare for the incoming Livonian Knights. Although often romanticized in historical accounts, the battle on the ice involved relatively modest numbers of troops. Alexander's core forces, known as the Druzhina, elite mounted warriors, were strategically placed on both flanks of the battlefield. This positioning enabled them to provide strength and mobility, crucial for responding to threats from multiple directions. The center of his formation was held by militia and infantry, who formed the core defensive line, engaging directly with the enemy. To further disrupt and harass the Crusaders, Nevsky deployed horse archers, likely of Turkish or Mongol origin. These archers were instrumental in creating confusion and striking from a distance. Modern historians estimate that Alexander commanded approximately 4,000 to 5,000 troops, a relatively small force for such a significant battle. Despite the modest size by medieval standards, the battle's impact on Russian and Baltic history was immense. Soon after, Bishop Hermann of Dorpat arrived with a smaller force of around 2,500 soldiers. This contingent was primarily composed of German and Danish knights, known for their heavy armor and training in traditional European cavalry tactics. The Crusader army was organized into a structured formation. Approximately 650 heavily armored knights were positioned in the center, while the Livonian brothers held the right flank. Regular militia and 1,000 lightly armored Estonian tribesmen were kept in reserve, ready to support the main force. Despite being outnumbered, Hermann planned to leverage the devastating impact of a heavy cavalry charge to turn the tide of the battle. The Crusaders' reliance on their armored cavalry was a key element of their strategy, aiming to break through Alexander Nevsky's defenses with a powerful and coordinated assault. As the battle began, Hermann's mounted knights charged in a wedge formation, aimed at breaking through the Russian center and capturing Alexander. They hit the Novgorodian militia hard and caused significant casualties. However, Alexander's center held firm despite the damage. Recognizing the opportunity, Alexander dispatched his horse archers to disrupt the enemy, while his and his brother's Druzhina advanced on both flanks in a pincer movement to encircle Hermann's forces. As the Crusader cavalry became bogged down in melee combat with the Russian infantry, Alexander launched a counteroffensive. His horse archers targeted the Crusaders' flanks, particularly the Danish forces on the right, with precision. The lightly armored Estonian auxiliaries, unaccustomed to such sustained and focused attacks, began to falter under the relentless barrage of arrows, leaving their heavier allies to fend for themselves. With their flanks exposed and their infantry support crumbling, the Crusader Knights found themselves increasingly surrounded by the Novgorodian forces. Encircled and facing overwhelming Russian numbers, the Crusaders fought desperately, but were ultimately overpowered. Alexander's retinue completed the envelopment, leading to a bloody slaughter of the Crusaders. A few managed to break through the Russian lines and escape across the lake, but the majority of the Livonian Order's forces were either killed or captured. Some Livonian brothers and knights managed to escape, but several elite knights and leaders, including Bishop Hermann, were killed. The Livonian Rhine Chronicle ultimately conceded the defeat of the Crusader forces at the Battle of Lake Peipus, acknowledging the overwhelming force and strategic superiority of Alexander Nevsky's army. Although the exact number of casualties remains difficult to determine, it is generally agreed that the Crusaders suffered severe losses, with hundreds of their elite knights and foot soldiers either killed or captured. Despite both sides experiencing heavy casualties, Alexander's larger and more determined army held the upper hand. His superior tactics, including the use of terrain and the flexibility of his forces, proved decisive in overcoming the Crusader onslaught. After the battle, Alexander Nevsky returned to Novgorod in triumph. He was greeted as a celebrated hero, his victory solidifying his already growing reputation as one of Russia's most capable military leaders. Laden with spoils of war, including armor, horses, and prisoners, Alexander's return to Pskov and Novgorod was marked by celebration. This victory not only brought glory, but also secured Alexander's leadership position in Novgorod during a critical period. The Livonian order, significantly weakened by its defeat, was forced to enter into peace negotiations. The terms of peace restored the borders to their pre-war positions, allowing Novgorod to retain its territorial integrity without pursuing further western expansion. Alexander focused on defending his own lands rather than engaging in additional conquests into Livonia, while the immediate military conflict ended with a return to the status quo. The Livonian order suffered long-term consequences from their defeat. The weakening of their forces led to multiple native rebellions throughout the eastern Baltic, as local populations, emboldened by the Crusaders' defeat, resisted further attempts at Christianization and domination. These rebellions would delay the full Christianization of the region for another 60 years, claiming many more lives in the process. Like the Battle of Tours in 732, the battle on the ice was fought not only to defend territory, but also to safeguard deeply rooted religious traditions. The battle on the ice symbolized the successful resistance of Orthodox Russia against Catholic attempts to impose control during the Northern Crusades. Both conflicts solidified the religious boundaries of their respective regions, becoming defining moments in the defense of their faiths. These battles not only protected territorial sovereignty, but also preserved the distinct religious identities of Catholic Europe and Orthodox Russia, shaping their historical and cultural trajectories.